Federal government refutes claims of hidden spending in World Bank report. Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission warns firms on non-compliance in mergers, acquisitions, business combinations. Oil jumps, stocks wobble as Middle East ceasefire hangs in the balance. Asia stocks rise as tech gains offset U.S.-Iran tensions. The program is Business Express, reaching you from Abuja, Nigeria's capital. I am Musa, your career guide. Now let's begin the program by telling you that the Central Bank of Nigeria says with the broader financial system grappling with funding shortfalls, banks still deposited about 4.1 trillion naira with the Apex Bank over, underscoring a deepening divide in liquidity conditions. The placements made through the Apex Bank's standing deposit facility, SDF, came at a time when average system liquidity remained in deficit, highlighting how cash-rich banks are opting to earn risk-free returns rather than lend into the interbank market. The trend points to persistent fragmentation in liquidity distribution, despite aggressive monetary tightening by the Apex Bank. Data compiled from market reports show that the banking system recorded an average liquidity deficit of roughly 4.1 trillion naira during the week, an improvement from about 5 trillion naira previously. Still, the scale of deposits at the central bank signals that surplus funds remain concentrated among a handful of institutions. The CBN has maintained a tight policy stance in recent months, deploying a frequent open market operation, OMO, to mop up excess liquidity and contain inflationary pressures. Last week alone, the bank conducted OMO sales exceeding 2 trillion naira, offset only partially by maturities and other inflows. The federal government has refuted claims of hidden spending in Federation revenues as alleged in interpretations of a recent World Bank report. The clarification was contained in a statement issued by the Federal Ministry of Finance and signed by the Minister of State for Finance, Atayo Edile. The ministry explained that the claims stem from a misinterpretation of the World Bank's Nigeria Development Update, particularly regarding Federation account allocation, committee deductions, and physical flows, which it said are legitimate and transparent. Now, the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN Governor Dr. Olayemi Cardoso has claimed or has calmed concerns over recent movements in Nigeria's external reserves, insisting there is no cause for alarm, despite short-term dips that have triggered public anxiety. Speaking on the development at a media briefing to mark the end of IMF World Bank spring meetings in Washington, D.C., Cardoso said Nigeria's reserve position remains comfortably above the International Monetary Fund's minimum adequacy threshold, stressing that the fundamentals of the economy remain intact. He noted that fluctuations in reserves are part of normal market dynamics, especially in a period where global financial conditions remain volatile and commodity-dependent economies face external pressures. The CBN governor also pointed to rising inflows from remittances as a stabilizing factor, noting that Nigeria currently receives about $600 million monthly, with a target of $1 billion by year end. According to him, reforms in diaspora engagement, improved payment infrastructure, and inclusion of international money transfer operators have strengthened formal inflow channels. He added that ongoing efforts to remove bottlenecks such as BV and enrollment challenges are helping to sustain inflows through official banking systems. Cardoso also linked Nigeria's wider financial stability to the successful recapitalization of banks, which he said has reinforced confidence from both domestic and foreign investors. Nigeria has launched a new youth-driven roadmap for transparency and accountability as the federal government unveiled National Action Plan 4 under the Open Government Partnership OGP, marking the end of the leadership tenure of Minister of Youth Development, Comrade Ayodele Olawande. This was the 22nd National Steering Committee meeting in Abuja, where Olawande formally handed over as state actors co-chair of the Nigeria OGP National Steering Committee after overseeing key reforms aimed at promoting openness in governance. He also noted that the newly launched NAB 4 represents the aspirations of a younger generation demanding more trust, openness, and responsive governance.
This plan must be put into action, and also citizens must seal the real results. To all committee members and partners, our transitions from this role does not mean we are leaving the work.
The new state actors, co-chair and Minister of Budget and Economic Planning, Senator Abubakar Atiku Bagudu, pledged to consolidate on the achievements already recorded.
Continue to support this process, but that will be under no illusion that you will be doing most of it for all the time, because it's consistent with the vision of our president.
The plan contains 12 commitments spread across 6 strategic areas, including digital governance, justice and human rights, anti-corruption, civic space, and climate action. The Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Commission, FCCPC, has cautioned companies, legal practitioners, and other stakeholders against failing to comply with statutory requirements governing mergers, acquisitions, and related business combinations under the Federal Competition and Consumer Protection Act 2018. A statement by the head of the Mergers and Acquisitions Department, MA AO David Ojugo, stated that any transaction meeting the prescribed thresholds under the merger notification guidelines must be submitted for prior review and approval before implementation, in line with Section 93, subsection 4 of the Act. The FCCPC explained that it has the mandate to review, approve, with or without conditions, or prohibit or notify mergers with the objective of safeguarding fair competition, preventing market concentration risk, and protecting public interest within the Nigerian economy. It noted that the requirement covers a wide range of transactions, including share and asset acquisitions, joint ventures, and other arrangements that fall within the legal definition of a merger under the Act and applicable regulations. The statement added that the notification process allows the Commission to determine whether a proposed transaction could significantly lessen competition in any relevant market, while also enabling effective monitoring of sectorial market dynamics. Now, how much is the Naira exchange rate for other currencies? Let's have a look. Well, let's take a look at the top takeaways on the themes, tensions and trends that emerged from the spring meeting as it relates to Nigeria. Well, we have a financial analyst, he's also an economist, Dr. Aliu Elias. You're welcome to Business Express.
Thank you for having me.
Well, the IMF decided to cut global growth to 3.1% for 2026. What does this signal about the strength of global recovery?
Right, I think it's the fallout of what is happening globally, and it speaks to purchasing power and development across the globe. So it is expected that when you have a kind of fall in expected outcome, it will lead to a cut in the expectation, especially for Africa, that it's actually hit more because it's appeared that we don't really have the expected or shock absorber to actually absorb such problems. So what is happening at the Middle East actually affecting the global world, and we only see the beginning. It will definitely have a ripple effect going forward.
Well, can you say at this point whether they actually were able to come up with a solution to what is actually happening in the Middle East? Because we've seen a situation whereby a lot of developing countries run into World Bank and IMF for loans so that they can actually address the issue of surging fuel prices.
Right. So the fact is that for them to have actually run to the IMF, that signified as the problem does not have a date that we could say maybe it will end. It simply means it's actually evolving. So they want to actually get that so that they can have a stronger economy. As you could see, in most countries in Africa, the cost of fuel, price of goods, food has actually moved beyond what it is before. So I think it's ideal, not only them, even the developing country as well, will actually definitely move towards that direction to get more funds so that they can cushion the negative effect of this global crisis.
But in the case of Nigeria, the minister said actually they are not actually planning to go that direction. What do you think is the best possible direction to go to address the issue of rising fuel prices? Because it's actually affecting a lot of businesses and individuals and even cost of living. Because we are talking about already there's cost of living crisis in the country.
Right. Well, the fact remains that it will affect every country. It just depends on how each country can actually manage it. So the challenge of supply chain affects everyone. Thanks to God that we have Dangote cushioning, reducing the challenges that would have faced by now. Who knows how much we would have been paying by now if it's not available. But because it can actually give us about 70% or thereabout, I think it's a good one. All we need to do is to focus on him more. Let's supply him more crude, because he also needs to buy crude from abroad. We could not supply him enough of what's actually wanted. I think and we must also negotiate with him further, because if we can actually have a subsidy, now we have some surplus because of the cost of barrel of crude oil globally. Now we have some surplus in that area. We can use it to actually balance so that citizens will not feel the pump price that we are experiencing. So we could actually supply him at a particular cost, which is not global price, so that if he is actually bringing it out, Nigerians can actually buy it at a price that is reduced compared to the global price.
With inflation projected to rise before easing in 2027, do you think central banks can actually afford to keep interest rates high for a very long time?
Right. So that's part of what Kelly Minister of Finance took to the IMF spring meeting. They went there to show that yes, we have a good macro economy. We have had a FX reform. And beyond that, we have a robust reserve. These are what we actually put up at the spring meeting. So I'm sure that they will also want to do what will make sure that they maintain that macro economies gain. And maintaining simply means that our interest rate need to either remain as it is now or continue to go down. Because our expectation is that by next MPC meeting, we'll see it coming down significantly.
Now, I actually said earlier that a lot of developing countries run into IMF for loan and these other things. How does this actually get to affect debt sustainability? Because these are countries that already they have loans, you understand? Now it's like with this situation to like trying to get more loans so that they can address this is actually, put us in a situation of a kind of debt crisis. So do you think that this particular meeting has been able to actually address this issue?
Well, the world debts sometimes are not that really bad, because if there is something that is actually emergency that you need to solve and you need to give attention to, it's not bad to go for.
But what about when it comes so much? When you ask
that's
so
where I'm
much?
actually going. So that generally is what you use it to do that actually matters. If you use it to cushion the problem that would have taken you, beyond control, it's a good one. The only thing is that we must make sure that our debt is tied to project. Our debt must be scrutinized by the National Assembly to ensure that, yes, and we must also make sure we consider our revenue, because debt is not even the problem we have in Nigeria. The major problem is the revenue side of it, because if you look at it now, the revenue we are making, we are using almost 90% to actually pay for the debt servicing. And debt servicing is obligatory. You must do that either you like it or not. So we must take a caution, which is that if we are getting to borrow money, we should get a debt that will have it tied to a project, and also solve problems that will have a multiplier effect positively to Nigerians.
Okay, still talking about debt. Debt vulnerabilities dominated discussions at the meetings, Our current global debt restructuring mechanisms working for developing economies.
Right. So when at the IMF spring meetings, I was so glad because we are looking at the cost of debt there. That's what they're actually looking at. So we are looking at it if the cost of it can reduce significantly, and that's part of the meeting that Nigeria was well featured in, because if the cost of debt is not that high, it makes you to have confidence, and the moratorium is also a good one. It will give confidence and give you time to actually use it and repay. So I think the major thing Africa is asking for is a reduced cost of debt.
Africa is also asking for a place on this, on the seat for, so that they can get adequate representation, not just as Africa, emerging economies, So what do you think in this, this call has been, it has been a recent call. How do you think IMF can actually get to address some of this issue? Because, it's like they're saying a lot of these things have been, most especially economic challenges, issues of raising money, when you have so much problems to solve and things like that.
I think it's a legitimate demand that Africa generally actually demand a seat, AU demand a seat. But the thing is that, what are you bringing to the table? That's the questions, because they always ask you that some people actually donate more compared to the other countries. So, and the more they donate, the more they have the opportunity to take the lead and have a seat on the table. So Africa must come together to do more, to actually have more say globally. And we must also, within ourselves, work together to make sure that African economy we can actually work on. You can look at the issue of Africa, the way we actually, depend on them for training and other things that they will do for us. You also look at most economy. We must go there. Is it cap in hand, begging for support? So we must find a way to strengthen ourselves, strengthen our economy. Because if you can strengthen your economy, you have a good output. You are also producing. You have opportunity of fighting for a seat. But I think as it is now, I doubt if you can actually have seats that we are actually asking for. But let's keep pushing and let's keep doing more as Africa.
Now, do you see the risk and rising energy? What risks do rising energy prices and supply disruptions pose for inflation, most especially food security and especially in Africa?
I think that's part of the IMF discussion as well. I think we have $83 million that we can actually tap from, and the aim is to bring about off-grid, energy to Nigeria. I think if you look at the effect seriously affects the cost of PMS. And if you look at PMS, once there is an increase in PMS, it has a ripple effect on goods and services. You could see cost of food is very, very expensive. Even schools, children that are resuming now, the schools are saying and they're adding more money to the cost of transportation. And that's how those the difference can actually affect the purchasing power and disposable income of Nigerians.
Overall, are there any takeaways from this particular meeting?
I think
Because I've seen Reuters, I've seen this on Reuters. It's like they are saying that meeting has not been able to bring about the necessary solution we need, most especially issue of rising fuel price. Most members are actually dependent on US to come up with a solution.
well, the fact remains that for Nigeria as a country, it gives us more global influence. We chair G24 meetings. We could showcase where we are in terms of macroeconomic achievement. But the issue of Iran, Israel, and US crisis, I think the global community is still finding it difficult to handle it as is expected, and it's affecting virtually every economy. Even the US economy is being affected. So I think they should rally around and look for solutions, because without solution, if this actually continue, it's going to affect major economy, not only developing economy. So I think as Reuters actually put it out, there's no solution in sight yet. They should go back, do more meetings, and also caution the two opposing sides to come together because of the global economy, not because of personal interests.
Dr. Aliu Elias, thank you for sharing your thought with us.
Thank you for having me.
Let's now move to capital market. The Nigerian Exchange, NGX Limited Traders Exchange. Traders exchange 195 billion naira shares. Details with Olayin Kaojo.
The NGX All-Share Index and market capitalization appreciated by 6.57% to close the week at 217,167.57 basis points and 139.827 trillion naira. A total turnover of 3.588 billion shares worth 195.313 billion naira in 254,553 deals were traded by investors on the floor of the exchange. The financial services industry led the activity chart with 2.498 billion shares valued at 94.005 billion naira in 111,052 deals. The services industry followed with 329.034 million shares worth 3.452 billion naira in 14,050 deals. While the third place, the oil and gas industry had a turnover of 152.472 million shares worth 42.511 billion naira in 19,022 deals. Trading in the top three equities, Sterling Financial Holdings Company, Access Holdings and Zenith Bank PLC accounted for 1.038 billion shares worth 46.081 billion naira in 33,067 deals, contributing 28.92% and 23.59% to the total equity turnover in volume and value. For exchange-traded products, a total of 6.737 million units valued at 1.056 billion naira were traded in 8,588 deals, while the bonds had a total of 314,033 units valued at 318.559 million naira in 39 deals. On summary of price changes, 61 equities appreciated, 36 equities depreciated, while 49 equities remained unchanged. Olayin Kaojo for Business Express.
Now that concludes Business Express. Business Express returns tomorrow. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the rest of your day.